Hello and welcome to Top Shelf Books. If you're joining us for the first time, hopefully we are going to add some off the beaten trail books to your TBR, as well as looking at some familiar favorites. Welcome to episode 6.5. So this is the other half of episode 6 in which we looked at books dedicated to dogs. There are so many books dedicated to dogs. I couldn't possibly fit them into one episode. I probably could just make this podcast about dogs and have plenty of material. So definitely not covering everything, but catching up with the other half of that episode. So if you want some great nonfiction books about dogs, you want to take a listen to episode 6. Continuing on with our discussion of dogs, I do have a little bit more nonfiction for you. Animals just intersect in so many areas of our lives, and I wanted to try to cover as many of them as possible. So the ecology of stray dogs is a little more academic, but I think worth looking into when there are so many things that displace dogs, and many of us unfortunately see stray dogs in our daily lives. All Creatures Safe and Sound is looking at animals in disasters, so also a little more academic. For some uplifting stories, A Home of Their Own by Jenkins and Dogtown by Betchel, looking at homing some of our dog friends. And then Irreconcilable Differences by Winograd. I will caution you, this one is looking at animal shelters, so there is content that can be upsetting to animal lovers, but animal shelters do need our support. I would love to see all the creatures in them safely homed and there be no need for such places. A few more texts about shelters and strays, and again, I will caution you, some of these do have content that can upset you if you're an animal lover, but they are part of the discussion. I am now talking through an animal. Puffin says hello to you all. So The Lives and Deaths of Shelter Animals by Gunther, that one can be difficult. The Ethics of Animal Shelters by Giro is a lot of different voices, so you can pick and choose where to spend your time and what you feel comfortable with reading. Rescue Road and Rescued by Anderson, both a little more uplifting. And then The Dog Merchants by Caven, investigating how dogs are bred, how dogs are sold, how we adopt dogs, sort of all the issues that surround those things. One of the things I love best about animals is their endless amount of personality and how their personalities differ. I make my home with a lot of cats. You'll be meeting them in a later episode dedicated to cat books. And every single one of them has a different personality. And for a time when I was younger, I helped out in horse stables to sort of save a little money on riding lessons. And there were 30 horses there, and they all had very different personalities and very different preferences. And there's just something magical about seeing that with different animals. So looking into the inner workings of dogs and how we think with dogs, A Philosopher's Dog by Gaeta, With Dogs at the Edge of Life by Dan, Philosophy Dog by O'Farrell, all excellent introductions to if you're wanting to get a little more thoughtful, but you want to be thoughtful with a furry friend. White Dog is a meditation on racism and civil rights, and it uses the dog as something of a metaphor. Unfortunately, it has not been reprinted recently, so it's expensive to track down a copy, but it's definitely an interesting text to think through. A Dog's World by Pierce. This is imagining if dogs were here and we were not. And of course, we have created dogs in many ways. So what do we owe them? How would they survive without us? All right, it took us a long time, but we have at last made it to the nonfiction section. So starting out with graphic novels, Stray Dogs is both eerie and adorable in turn, so definitely worth your time. I loved Scooby-Doo as a girl. I still find it weirdly funny. So Scooby Apocalypse is a trip. It's hilarious, as well as dealing with some more grown-up issues that you might not expect from Scooby and the gang. Week 3 is a little more sobering, so again, animal lovers, want to you may want to page through and then decide if you want to keep going. I'm cheating a little bit, including ElfQuest, I admit. It's one of my great favorites. I've loved it for most of my life. And the creatures therein are wolves and not dogs, but I include them because Wendy Pini is an amazing artist, and in the faces of the various wolves and in their behavior, you can see a lot of things that our dogs do. And she takes such care and attention with those background panels that any other artist could just kind of throw some trees back there or some background or whatever, but she makes you learn and love these individual wolves just as much as the characters who love them and who bond with them. So if you have not checked out ElfQuest, it's worth your time. There are many, many, many dogs in horror books, and I don't know if this is a result of Cujo, which I've included here, or it's just sort of a natural thing. I did teach a class once about human animal interactions and dangerous animals, and dogs actually do kill quite a few people every year. So maybe there's something to the horror imagination and seizing on dogs. So if you're looking for some dogs for creepy season and you've already dealt with Cujo, there's Jagger by Rufty, The Hounds of Hell edited by Perry, which has a lot of different stories, The Poacher by McNaughton, and Loose the Dog is by Workman. There are many more. This is just a sample. I told you there were more, and I had to include more because I have a little bit of a confession for you. I am addicted to horrible pulp horror novels in which the creatures face off with the humans, and here's the really bad part of the confession. I'm always rooting for the animals. I'm like, eat them, tigers, go. I don't know what this says about me as a human being. It's fiction, so it's probably fine. But if you need more horror or more thrillers that include dogs, The Hand That Feeds You by Rich includes dogs bringing about the demise of character. Wild Dog is also a thriller by Jean Cor. The Dogs by Cowder, The Haven by Diamond, and The Pack by Fisher, which has been published under a couple of different names, by the way, but it's recently been brought back to life as The Pack. These are all standard pulp horror killer animal novels, and for that, I love them. But maybe you prefer a little more mystery. Of course, dogs feature heavily in cozy mysteries as our helpers, and the amazing things that dogs can do, they don't usually even have to ask you to suspend your disbelief very much. So, Killing Trail by Mizushima, A Borrowing of Bones by Munir, Dogs by Kress, The Finders by Burton. All of these are mysteries that intersect with dogs helping their human companions along the way. I've also included The Bones Omnibus by Wheaton. This one's a little different, a little more sci-fi fantasy. It's also enormous, but really fun book. And I forget how it stumbled into my lap. It might have been when I was looking for those pulp novels and I found it along the way, but I really enjoyed it, so I'm passing it along to you. Speaking of science fiction and fantasy, I also wanted to include some books of that type. City by Simak, dogs kind of looking back on human civilization. Fluke by Herbert. If you've not read any Herbert, he's a lot of fun. He's an enjoyable writer, and he doesn't require a lot of mental energy. And Oath of Dogs by Wagner. I'm going to be honest with you, Dog's Body by Jones and Hounded by Hearn were suggested to me by others when I was talking to them about what books had to be included. These ones kept coming up, so I cannot tell you for sure how enjoyable they are, but others have vouched for them, so I'm including them. I've also included A Dog's Heart, or you might see it published as The Heart of a Dog by Bulgakov. I'm going to caution you on this one if you're an animal lover. It has some Dr. Moreau vibes. It is a classic piece of literature and an early piece of science fiction, though, so I thought it deserved a place in the shelf. More science fiction and fantasy. Lives of the Monster Dogs, Bacchus, Top Dog, Carol, in which a human gets subsumed into the form of a dog and has to deal with their situation. Watchers by Kuntz is a famous one and loved by dog folks. Thor by Smith. This is another one that's kind of um, off the beaten path. It has the pulp cover on it, but really, really good read. And then you can quibble with me over The Humans by Matt Haig if you want to. It's not really about dogs, but it's an outside view of humans. And one of the things I often wonder about our animals is what they must be thinking sometimes when we do things. I know my cats find taking socks off and putting socks on to be a really interesting thing, and I always wonder what they think it is that I'm doing. Can I take off my fur? What is sort of the cat view of that? So an outside view of humans kind of seems to fit with dogs. This is going to be my favorite part of the discussion because I get to introduce you to Colonel S.P. Meek if you have not met him before. Before we get to Meek, though, I wanted to include some children's literature that deals with dogs. Again, millions of books out there. You could literally build yourself a house out of the children's books that are dedicated to dogs. But famously, The 101 Dalmatians, if you've only seen the animated version, and Noof, in which a giant dog adopts a tiny kitten. I couldn't resist. All right, so Colonel Meek, he was an army chemist in World War One, and then went on to become a children's book author, which is sort of an odd shift. But I found his book Rusty, a Cocker Spaniel, in a used bookstore when I was a girl, and absolutely fell in love with it. Took me forever to track down a copy as an adult, and I'm happy to say that Amazon is now republishing. Well, I don't know if I'm happy about it because they're expensive, but I'm happy they're coming back into print. They're republishing his works, and he has a whole series of children's books with similar titles. Boots the Working Dog, Pacer is about a horse. There's dogs, there's horses, but they're wonderful because he really knows his animal personalities and you fall in love with these animals. So if you have a young person in your life, I encourage you find an SP Meek book for them. They are wonderful books. And I hate to end on a sad note, but I wanted to include some other wonderful titles, and the best way I could find to combine them was to call them titles that rip your heart right out. One of the worst things about loving animals is, of course, losing our animals. Mason's Lost Companion. If you know someone who's lost a pet, or if you have recently lost a pet, this can be a really nice book to help you through those moments. There's also The Last Walk. It's a recent publication that deals with a similar title. Leica's Window by Caswell, Russia's Space Dog. She's recently been honored in graphic novel form as well. Obviously, I don't agree with animal testing and some of the terrible historical things that have been done with animals, but it's still a wonderful book. It just is going to rip your heart out. And then, for some reason, there is a genre of children's books that I'm convinced is written by people who hate children. And in the list belongs Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls. I'm not telling you not to read it because it's a wonderful book and I've reread it as an adult, but The Yearling, Old Yeller, there's all these books that just they are calculated to destroy your soul. And I don't know why we want to give them to children. Is it because we as adults feel crushed and so we want to pass it on? Is it a form of generational hazing? I do not know. But Where the Red Fern Grows is beautiful. I still have very vivid memories of some of the scenes from it. So I do recommend it as a book for dogs, but I recommend it with 2 boxes of tissues. All right, time to shake off the blues from the Rip Your Heart Out books and think about cute tiny baby Dalmatians if you're looking at your screen. I just love that little baby. So here are some of today's titles. As always, if there are titles that you think I have missed, I love meeting new books. I love meeting people through books. So I am excited to hear what books make you smile or need 2 boxes of tissues. So send them my way. More of today's titles. As always, support your local libraries. If there is such a thing as an angel on the earth that isn't Jamie Farr, I believe that they are probably a librarian. Librarians are wonderful human beings. They can help you find amazing things. More of today's titles. If you are fortunate enough to live near books, support your local booksellers and your indie booksellers as well. The final list of today's titles. Again, please let me know if you think anyone was left off in error. And as always, thank you so much for allowing me into your life, for listening. I hope that you found something wonderful to read. I am always open to ideas for new themes or topics, so if there's something that you are looking for books in your life, please send them my way. It doesn't have to be an entire episode. If you're just struggling to find a topic, I'm happy to do some searching and see what I can find. So you can reach me at navalianlibrary@gmail.com. You can also find me at Books and Piles on Tumblr. I hope that you have a wonderful day. If there are some dogs or other creatures in your life, give them some pats from me.